My name is Ethan Cross, and today I'm opening up about a life where my own family never saw me as more than the forgotten one. While my brother basked in glory, I was pushed into the shadows until a single moment shattered everything they thought they knew about me. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question how far love, jealousy, and truth can twist a family. But before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a quick comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support keeps these real emotional stories alive and gives me the drive to bring you more every week. From the start, the Cross household was split down the middle. Lucas wore the crown as the golden child, and I was little more than a shadow at the far end of the long oak table. Richard, my father, took every chance to boast about his favored son. Helena, my mother, smiled on cue, her pride always glued to Lucas's every word. By the time I spoke up, the conversation had already moved past me. Silence became my only safe choice. I still remember being 15. Lucas had just shared the news of an elite science program. My father raised a crystal flute, declaring, "That is what it means to carry the Cross name. Excellence, brilliance, leadership." Then he cut his gaze toward me with a curling grin. "And Ethan, you managed to scrape through gym class, a small victory, but still." The table erupted in chuckles, even my mother's restrained one. The sting wasn't in his words, it was in the fact that none of them imagined I could ever be more. Helena's whispers haunted me daily. While passing me dishes or folded clothes, she'd mutter, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Calm voice, cruel message. Each remark sank into me like stones in deep water. Lucas thrived in this environment. Confident, sharp-featured, and tall, he played the perfect heir. He knew he had won their hearts and rubbed it in whenever he could. At 17, I started bussing tables at a local diner to buy my own things. One evening as I left for work, Lucas reclined on the sofa, soaking up our parents' attention. He called after me, "Don't smear grease on the door. The Cross family doesn't need the neighbors thinking we've hired a servant." Richard and Helena chuckled while I slipped out quietly, pretending it didn't matter. Inside, it chipped another piece away. The only one who looked at me differently was my grandfather, Samuel Cross. Decades earlier, he had built Cross Enterprises from nothing. But unlike my father, Samuel valued character over cash. When I visited him, he didn't ask about grades or test scores. He wanted to know what I dreamed about, what made me curious. One autumn evening, we sat together on his garden bench. He leaned in close and said, "Ethan, don't mistake their blindness for truth. You hold something Lucas does not. When the time is right, you'll understand. Never let them convince you otherwise." His words stayed with me, though I couldn't grasp their meaning back then. All I knew was that life under my parents' roof was a game rigged against me. Lucas shadowed Richard in advisory sessions, tagged along to trade negotiations, and was introduced at dinners as the bright future of the Cross legacy. My role was mowing lawns, fetching errands, and staying out of sight. The distance between us widened as we grew. When Lucas got into Crestfield University, Helena celebrated that very night with catered food and premium sparkling wine. Guests assumed I must be proud, offering polite nods. Behind my smile, though, I felt more invisible than ever. By the time I turned 20, it was clear my name carried no meaning of its own. I existed only as Lucas's brother, the shadow trailing behind the golden child. To survive, I threw myself into small jobs. Oating boxes, cleaning tables, anything that paid. Summers that Lucas spent boasting about adventures in distant countries, I spent sweating in warehouses or scrubbing dishes. My parents dismissed it all as wasted effort. They couldn't see that every long shift hardened me in ways comfort never could. Even so, their judgment followed me like a shadow. My father's words echoed, "You'll never be good enough." My mother's frosted glances trailed me down hallways. And Lucas, his laughter stung most, effortless, polished, always a reminder of how easily he wore their crown. When ceremony day approached, I already knew humiliation was inevitable. The Cross family loved their public spectacles, and this one was bound to be the grandest yet. I braced myself for it, telling myself to stay silent, endure it, swallow the pride I had left. I never imagined that the silence I had accepted would soon be broken wide open. That morning, the house swarmed like a festival ground. Helena barked orders at staff about flower arrangements and food deliveries. Richard adjusted his gold watch at the foyer mirror, practicing lines for the speech he would deliver. My role was clear: fade into the background. My outfit was a faded blazer that used to belong to Lucas, altered just enough to fit. My assigned seat was buried in the farthest rows. From there, I watched him step across the platform, his name announced to thunderous applause. Richard's chest puffed with pride, Helena glowing at his side. I clapped too, though each clap felt like it pulled me deeper into the floor. Afterward came the true show. A banquet at a Manhattan event hall, gleaming chandeliers raining gold across polished wood. Luxury cars lined up outside as politicians, executives, and socialites poured in. They weren't just here for Lucas's degree, they came to witness his coronation as heir. I stuck to the back wall, half hidden behind lilies, like an afterthought. Guests who passed barely nodded. I heard whispers. That must be the other son. To them, I was a footnote in Lucas's story. Then came the moment I dreaded. Richard took the platform, microphone in hand, his voice booming across the grand hall. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor my brilliant son, Lucas Cross. The crowd roared. Lucas stood at the front, wearing that effortless confidence he had been raised on. My father pressed on. The Cross family has built more than an enterprise. We have built a legacy. Tonight, I name Lucas the heir to it all. The $82 million enterprise, the luxury electric SUV waiting outside, and the $15 million estate in Fairhaven. He is our future, and I could not be prouder. The cheers rattled the room. Crystal flutes clinked, voices lifted in celebration. I stayed seated in the shadows, my heart dropping lower with every toast. Helena leaned into Richard's arm, smiling as if their life's mission was complete. For a second, Lucas's eyes met mine. He raised his flute toward me, not as an invitation, but as mockery. His curling grin carried a clear message. I had lost, he had won. I wanted to melt into the floor, to escape the suffocating weight of that hall. As the crowd erupted, Helena passed me, pausing just long enough to whisper, her words sharp as glass. At least don't spoil this moment for Lucas. Keep to yourself. Then she walked away, slipping her hand into Lucas's with that perfect smile back in place. Speeches piled on, toasts grew louder. I sat unmoving, fists locked beneath the table, rage and sorrow colliding in my chest. I thought of Samuel Cross, the only one who had ever spoken to me like I mattered. His voice came back to me over the years. When the time is right, you'll know. What I didn't realize then was that the time had already arrived, and it carried a truth powerful enough to break my silence forever. One day, the truth ways. He'll set you free. Samuel Cross's voice replayed in my head, clearer than the celebration around me. But what is the truth? To me, there had only ever been one reality. Lucas wore the crown, and I was the forgotten one. That night in the grand hall, my father had announced it to the world, the applause hammering down like nails, sealing my fate. I thought silence was my destiny, that I'd swallow the pain just as I always had. Then the music softened, and I noticed him. A man in a dark jacket slipped through the crowd, his eyes locked on me alone. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. His pace was deliberate, cutting through the laughter and chatter as though none of it touched him. When he reached my table, he leaned in close, set down a heavy cream folder and whispered, steady and low, "Now it's time they know the truth about you." Before I could speak, he straightened his coat and vanished into the throng. I stared at the folder, my hand trembling as I pulled it against my lap. For years, no one had ever suggested there was more to me than the role of shadow. My pulse hammered as I debated whether to open it or run. The speeches on stage blurred into noise. Lucas beamed beside Richard, guests surrounding them in congratulations, while my focus narrowed to the flap of that folder. Fear tangled with curiosity. What if it was some cruel trick? But Samuel's words tugged at me, urging me forward. I tore it open. Inside were stamped documents, signatures, official seals. My name, Ethan Cross, appeared again and again. Shares of Cross Enterprises, ownership of the Fairhaven estate, and accounts I had never known existed. On the last page, a transfer of authority signed years earlier, Samuel's signature, bold and final. Then the letter. His handwriting, steady, undeniable. Ethan, if you hold this, the time has come. I watched both you and Lucas grow, and I knew arrogance could not protect this family. I chose you because you understand humility, because you know endurance, and because you see people as more than their value. Everything I built is yours. Do not doubt it. My vision blurred as I read the words again and again. He had chosen me. Not Lucas, not Richard. Me. The truth hit harder than any insult I had endured. For years, I believed their cruelty defined me, that silence was my only armor. But this folder wasn't just paper. It was proof. It was freedom. I slid the documents into my jacket, pressing them against my chest. My father's booming voice carried from the front of the room, his reputation shining like the chandeliers overhead. To challenge him would mean stepping into a storm I might never escape. Yet my choice crystallized in that moment. No more silence. I rose from my chair, my legs unsteady, but my resolve unshaken. Glasses clinked, another toast echoed, and heads turned as I moved toward the platform. Richard's face darkened, his frown betraying displeasure at my approach. Lucas's curling grin suggested he assumed I'd bow to him publicly as always. Helena's subtle shake of the head warned me to sit back down. But Samuel's words thundered louder in my memory. You have something Lucas does not. Never let them convince you otherwise. And for the first time in my life, I felt taller than their judgment. One day, the truth will set you free. Tonight, that day had arrived. I climbed the steps to the platform, pulse hammering in my ears, fists clenched tight at my sides. Richard leaned toward the microphone, his jaw tense but his lips twisting into a forced smile. In a voice only I could hear, he muttered, Ethan, this isn't your moment. But I stood firm. Actually, Father, I said, my voice wavering at first but growing stronger, this moment belongs to me. The room froze. Glasses hung suspended mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Lucas's confident grin faltered. All eyes bore into me as I pulled the heavy cream folder from my jacket, pressing it against my chest like armor. Richard's voice dropped, sharp as a blade. Step down before you humiliate yourself. For years I had obeyed words like that. For years I had shrunk when told I didn't belong. But not this time. My hand shook as I lifted the papers high. I'm not the one humiliating myself, I declared. You are. Gasps swept the hall. Lucas gave a shaky chuckle, raising his crystal flute. What are you doing? Sit down before you make a fool of yourself. I unfolded the documents, the seal of Cross Enterprises shimmering under the chandeliers. These are transfer agreements signed by Samuel Cross, I said, my voice steady now. He chose me. Not you, Lucas. Not you, Father. The company, the Fairhaven estate, the accounts, they've been mine for years. Whispers ricocheted through the crowd. Richard lunged toward me, face red, spitting words through clenched teeth. This is absurd. The old man must have been confused. He didn't know what he was signing. But then a voice silenced the hall. I knew exactly what I was doing. The audience turned as Samuel Cross rose slowly from a chair at the front. His cane tapped the polished floor with each step until he stood beside me, resting a steady hand on my shoulder. His presence carried more authority than anyone in the room. I entrusted these documents to be delivered when the moment was right. That moment is now. I watched both of my grandsons grow. Lucas, you have brilliance, but brilliance without humility becomes arrogance. Richard, you built wealth but lost compassion. Ethan has endured neglect and cruelty without hardening his heart. He knows the worth of people, not just power. The crowd erupted again. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Lucas's face was drained of color. Grandfather, you can't mean this. I've achieved everything to make you proud. Samuel looked at him with quiet sorrow. You achieved only for yourself. That is not leadership. That is vanity. Richard turned on him, desperation cracking his voice. You'd hand everything to the boy who failed? To the one who never lived up to the cross name? Samuel's reply cut clean. I am entrusting everything to the one who will redefine what the cross legacy stands for. Silence fell heavy. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim under the weight of his words. For the first time in my life, I felt the power of being seen, not as an afterthought, but as a rightful heir. I turned toward the hall, my voice carrying with strength I didn't know I had. All my life, I was told I'd never be enough. Tonight you heard my father repeat it, but here, I held the papers high. Here is proof I was chosen. My grandfather believed in me when no one else did. I won't waste what he built. I will honor it, not by chasing profits, but by valuing people. The applause began hesitantly, then grew into a storm that drowned out the silence that had bound me for years. Richard's face burned crimson. Helena's polished smile quivered into nothing, and Lucas stood frozen, glass still raised as if time itself had abandoned him. At the back of the room, I caught sight of the stranger who had delivered the folder. He met my gaze, gave a single nod, and disappeared once more into the crowd. Clarity surged through me. This was never just about wealth, it was about breaking chains. The cruelty, the whispers, the years of humiliation had led to this moment where I finally stood unashamed. I turned to Samuel, lowered my head and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for believing in me," I whispered. Samuel's grip on my shoulder tightened. Now prove I was right. When I turned back toward the audience, I no longer saw strangers judging the family's failure. I saw witnesses to my transformation. The story they had written about me was over. Tonight, I began writing my own. For the first time, Lucas dropped his gaze. The grin he had worn his whole life dissolved, leaving only fear. Under the chandeliers, I realized the truth. I had never been the forgotten one. I had only been waiting for the moment to reveal who I truly was. The applause faded into murmurs as the weight of what had unfolded settled over the room. Richard's fists tightened at his sides, his voice bitter as poison. This isn't over. You don't know what you're stepping into, Ethan. He turned sharply and stormed out, his polished shoes cracking against the floor like gunfire. Helena trailed after him, her painted smile gone, her eyes refusing to meet mine. Lucas remained frozen, knuckles white around the stem of his glass. He hissed through clenched teeth. You don't deserve this. You'll never be my equal. I met his eyes without flinching. Maybe I'll never be who you think I should, but I am who Grandfather believes I can be, and that's enough. The look on his face told me everything. His foundation had crumbled, and beneath it was fear. Beside me, Samuel stood taller than I had seen in years. His cane steadied him, but his voice rang strong. This family changes tonight. The enterprise is in hands that know the weight of being overlooked. Ethan, the burden is yours, but it is also your gift. His words landed heavy, terrifying, yet liberating. I understood then. Leadership was not about proving Richard wrong or crushing Lucas. It was about honoring Samuel's faith and carrying forward a legacy rooted in resilience. The applause rose again, not for Lucas, not for Richard, but for me. It swelled through the hall like a tide, washing away decades of silence. My chest lifted, my shoulders straightened. I was no longer a shadow. Hours later, when the crowd thinned and the chandeliers dimmed, I stepped outside into the cool Fairhaven night. City lights stretched across the skyline, no longer symbols of a world closed to me, but promises waiting to be claimed. I thought of the boy who once sat at the far end of the long oak table, mocked into silence. The boy who believed he was worthless. And then I thought of the man I was becoming, finally free of the cage they had built around me. The lesson was clear. Being underestimated does not erase your worth. Sometimes the harshest judgments shape the strongest leaders. Labels do not define your future. What matters is the truth you carry inside, and the courage to stand when the moment arrives. Samuel joined me, his hand warm on my shoulder. You see it now, don't you? Yes, I answered steady. I see it clearly. He smiled, his eyes reflecting the glow of the skyline. Then carry it well. The future is yours. I breathed deep, letting the night air wash away years of fear, shame, and invisibility. I was not the forgotten one. I was the heir chosen not for perfection, but for resilience, for heart, for strength, forged in silence. And now, to those of you listening, if you've ever been pushed aside, mocked, or told you'll never be enough, remember this. Your worth is not set by those who doubt you. Your moment will come, and when it does, the truth will speak louder than every insult combined. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck something inside you, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Drop a comment telling me which part spoke to you most. And don't forget, subscribe to this channel so I can keep bringing you more stories that prove even shadows can rise into the light.